Welcome back, developers. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at inserting and updating data inside of our database. So let's go ahead and get started to see how we're going to insert. Now, before we start, I'm going to look at the table we're going to insert because I need to know the names of my fields. So I have product ID, name, description, price, and active. Now, not only do I need to recognize what the names of those fields are, I also need to know the types that each field is. And you're going to see why in just a minute. So I've got these four different items here, and I'm going to come over here to query. And we're going to start with insert. So I'm going to say insert into. Notice both of those become capitalized. These are words we have to use in order to insert data into a table. Then I'm going to specify products. Now, one of the things that we need to know is with the insert, if I'm going to insert all of my fields in the order that they are listed in the table, then I don't have to list my field names. So I can simply come over here and go values, and then I have a parenthesis, and I'm going to list first my product ID, and then I'm going to list my title. Now my title is a varchar, so it's going to need to be inside of a single quotes. We're going to call this widgets. I then have a description. My description is a text, which is a long form field. This could be as long as I want. I'm just going to do something really simple here. Next, I have a price. This is a decimal or numeric value. I do not need to use my single quotes. So I'm going to list 1978. And then if I'm going to be active or not, which is going to be a tiny int, 1 for active, 0 for not active, I'm going to put in a 1. And if I go and run this, you notice it doesn't give me an error message. And if I look down the bottom, it says, hey, affected rows, 1. And if I come over to my data, you're going to notice here's my product ID, my widgets, blah, 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 price, and active. So exactly what I need. Now, if I come back to my product table description, you're going to notice a couple of things. Number one, my product ID is actually a auto increment. So it's going to automatically generate a number for me. And I actually already have a default value of 1 for active. Now, why is that important? Well, if I don't tell it those values, it knows what they are for me. So I'm going to come over here to my query, and I'm going to change this. I'm going to specify that I want to put in the title, description, and price. Now, because I put those in parentheses before my values, these are the 3 columns it's going to expect to enter data into. So this means I'm going to need to change my values, which is fine if I'm inserting a second one. I'm going to change the price. We'll leave the description saying that's fine. And I'm going to choose to execute the SQL. Now you'll notice this error in here. It says, oh, I don't notice title. Okay, so I'm going to say, okay, double check my products. Notice it's listed as name, not title. That's fine. I'm going to choose name. But notice how name is blue. This is something that's kind of a built-in keyword for my SQL. Not necessarily like SQL because it didn't go all caps. So this is where we're going to use the backtick and the backtick to close it out. That makes name and says, hey, I'm not using a keyword. I am using a field name. Now with all the tick marks put in place for all 3 columns, just to be safe, we go ahead and we execute this. And now we can come over here to data. You may need to refresh to see this, but you can see the new data is listed there. Now, interesting about this is I can actually insert more than 1 row at a time. So what I'm going to do in a case like this is I'm going to bring my values down to a new row just to make it a little bit easier. and call this screen door 2. Then after my closing parenthesis, I'm going to put a comma, and then I'm going to have another open parenthesis. Then I'm going to put a price and close it. If I want to add a third row, comma, and a closing parenthesis. Now when I run this, I can come over here to data. You see in this case it didn't refresh automatically. So I can click the refresh button and I see screen door 2, magic items, and rockets, all with the associated values. Notice that my product ID keeps on incrementing, as does my active, and it just sets it to 1, which is the default value. So this is a really easy way to insert multiple records in one insert statement. Now, if I would like to insert data into this table using Heidi SQL, it's pretty easy. What I'll do is go up to my toolbar. There is a green plus icon. It says Insert Row into Table. Once I've clicked that button, I'm going to come in here and double click on my field I want to change, and I'm going to put this in. Desk item. I can hit my tab key or I can click off it. And you notice how this is right now is null and I have these kind of little red arrows. That's because this data hasn't been saved yet. Not until I move off of this row. When I do that, notice that it gets the product ID number and that little red corner triangle or arrow where you want to think of it as, that has gone away. That's because it has gone in and saved that data. That's an important thing for us. Now, what happens if I want to go in and update one of these values? Let's say product ID number 3. Well, this is actually pretty easy. Come over here in my query window and do update. And what am I updating? I'm updating products. And I'm going to set. Now, the set works with update. It says, hey, I'm updating products, but I'm going to set a specific value. Well, which value? Well, I'm going to set the name of my item. So if I don't remember what it is, I can come over here to my table description. I see that it's name. So I'm going to put in the tick marks, name equals, and then the new value, updated value. Because this is a varchar, I'm going to have it inside of single quotes. Now I have to be very careful. If I were to update this particular query, every record would then get the name updated value. That's not helpful. So I'm going to put in a where product ID equals 3. Now I'm going to come over here and execute this query. Down in my little bar below, you'll see rows affected is 1. Come over here in my data tab. I don't see it here, but if I refresh, you see I have an updated value. Very easy to do. Now, what happens if I want to update more than one field? Well, I could run another query, or after I have name equals, and then what it's going to equal, I can simply put a comma and say something like price equals $37.73. And change that to updated value 2 just so we see the change. Execute my SQL statement. Come back to my data tab. Refresh. I see updated value 2. And I see a new price. So that's working as you expect. If I want to make this change inside of Heidi SQL, well, I can come over here and say, oh, it should be updated value. That was just a temporary thing. I'm going to come over here and call it super widgets. Once again, notice how that little red arrow up in the upper left-hand corner, as soon as I move off of it, it goes in and commits that change and saves it for me. And so changing inside of Heidi SQL is very easy. Now, despite the fact that inserting data and updating data inside of Heidi SQL is very easy, you should know that you're not going to do this very often. Why? Well, most of the time, it's not you as a database administrator that's going to do it. It's going to be some sort of end user. That might be a manager. It might be a sales clerk. It might be an inventory specialist. It might be the website that's doing it because someone ordered something online. You have to update the quantity you have in stock. Now, that's something we don't see here right now, but that's something you could add using the alter command that we talked about in a previous video. So what would we wind up doing? What do we need to know? Well, we actually need to know the SQL commands because a lot of times those are going to be embedded into our application. That way we have to write these SQL commands inside of our application, or we'll have to call a store procedure and write them in the store procedure that our website, our desktop application, our mobile app, whatever, is going to be calling. When it calls it, it runs those SQL commands, and that's why it's very important to know SQL commands for things like inserting, updating, etc., because that's not going to be the end user doing it. We're going to need to do it, and we need to give them access programmatically. Hope you found this video helpful. If so, we've got some more data manipulation language commands that are coming up, especially with things like the delete and lock in our next video. So stay tuned and look for that video next.